Hi, this is Kirby Sommers, and I welcome you to the Kirby Sommers True Crime Podcast. I know I'm doing a lot of these. Today is November 26th. It is Saturday. It's the long holiday weekend in the United States because of Thanksgiving. And frankly, this is in response, my podcast of today, to Daryl Hamamoto, better known as Professor Hamamoto's really good podcast of Thanksgiving, where he delved into the subject of Whitney Webb. And what happened as a result has been, frankly, pretty surprising. Many people left a lot of comments. Some of these people are people who have been marginalized by her, according to them, after she took some information from them, did not credit them. So everyone is sort of coming out, including the father of her second child. So I did a little digging. I haven't, I'm not going to waste my time too much on Whitney Webb, but I'll tell you what I did discover in a very short time. So the photograph that I use for this podcast is an image of her father, who is um, a multi-generational, very wealthy man. His name is Richard Spur Webb the Fourth. And then the image that I use to the right of her is her great-great-grandfather, who was already very wealthy. He was born on December 16th, 1888. He died on August 28th, 1927. He spent his time in Lexington, Kentucky. I will return to him. But by the time that Whitney Webb's great-great-grandfather is sort of making news, he is already very wealthy. And when I read his obituary to you, or parts of his obituary, you will see that he was known throughout the United States. So I discovered just basic information using a site that Professor Hamamoto had used during his show. And so basic facts from Facts Buddy, which is a website. You can just Facts Buddy, and you can go and you'll see the same thing that I saw and that Professor Hamamoto saw. But however, I'm going to read a little bit more from this website, and then I'll go into other areas and explain why there's so much controversy surrounding Whitney Webb, and why so many people are upset at her. People whose names probably will be very familiar to you when I get to that part in my podcast today. So it says on this website, Whitney Webb is an independent journalist, writer, and podcaster based in Chile. She was born in Florida, the website states, and then they go on to add she keeps her personal life private. And so they say they do not know when she was born. I will tell you that Whitney was born in 1989, as she just told Glenn Beck on that recent show that she is 33 years old. So if you do the simple math, it's 2022, and you subtract it, you will get the year 1989. So we don't know her birthday. but we know that she was born in 1989. So the website continues to say, Webb moved to South America in September 2012, first to Peru and then to southern Chile. And since we now know the date of her birth of 1989, we can surmise that she was 23 years old at the time. And then the website continues to say, Webb is happily married to her South American husband. Together, the couple shares a daughter named Tara Malin. The family resides in southern Chile. Since 2014, they occasionally go on vacations to various locations around the world. Well, had I read this before knowing that Whitney Webb is a multi-generational multimillionaires and possibly even in the B area, billionaire, I would have thought, oh, well, she married a guy that has money in South America, and that is what allows her to travel. No, she comes from multi-generational wealth, very wealthy people. Her father comes from very wealthy people, people who have made money for generational wealth. Very few people hold on to their money, but it seems that the Webbs have held on to their money. So it goes on to explain her education. She attended Pine View School and graduated in 2008. So, because I don't know if she was, it would almost appear to me that she probably has a birthday in the latter part of the year. So let's say probably from July to December might be her birth date. Because if it's 2008 and you just do the simple math, she would have been 19 years old. But it's possible that, of course, she was 18, like many people are when they graduate. This school, from their website, it is for gifted children. It's located in Sarasota County. It was created to meet the needs of intellectually gifted students. The grades are unusual. They don't start at kindergarten. They start in grades 2 to grades 12. So from 2 to 12, that's a very broad base of children. And it says from their website, it is the only school of its kind in the state of Florida and one of the few standalone gifted programs in the nation. Again, from their website, it says that as a full-time gifted program, Pineview maintains selective entrance requirements. Students may be referred for admission by administrators, teachers, staff members, or parents. And so prospective students are admitted based on the gifted identification standards that are required by the Florida Department of Education. The next area that this website talks about is labeled Whitney Webb's net worth. And Professor Hamamoto went into that on his podcast, and it reads, she earns her wealth from her career, which is, we know that that's not true. Okay, but I'm going to just read to you what this website says. She earns her wealth from her career, therefore, she has amassed a fortune over the years. Webb's estimated net worth is $9,800,765. So very close to $10 million. All right, I'm just rounding it off. And of course, it's probably a lot more than that because she comes from multi-generational wealth. Very, very wealthy family with, frankly, connections to Morgan Stanley, which I'll discuss briefly. Her father is Richard Spurr, Spurr. So that's another family name we'll have to look into if anybody has the time or the wherewithal to do that. Webb the Fourth. He is a wealthy real estate attorney. He was born in 1952 because some information claims that he is 70 years old. If that is correct, then he was born in 1952. What's interesting is that as I was looking for stuff, her father, sorry, I don't know if I agree with Professor Hamamoto's claim that Whitney is a man, but I don't know, because clearly she was keeping a lot of secrets. She never talked about her personal life. Most people talk about their personal life, but now it's becoming clear. And as I continue to uh, uh, sort of go over the people who left messages on the message board for Professor Hamamoto's show on Whitney Webb, things will become very clear to you. So, but as recent as 5 hours ago, and I took a screen image of that, her father has been updating his online information. So I actually, July 18, and then it says updated about 5 hours ago. So apparently he's updating a lot of information. So it's showing companies that he is affiliated with, and it's showing, quote, inactive, inactive, inactive. All right, so one of them was Crown Ridge Management, LLC in Florida, established in 2006. Another one is called Pell Technologies, LLC, established in 2001. Another one is, quote, a nonprofit. Nonprofits are really always sketchy. So we have Gator Creek's Estates Improvement Association, which is, quote, a nonprofit. He is a Republican. He lives in, I have a couple of places for him, but it says Merritt Island, which is an island for very wealthy people in Florida. He, again, he's registered to vote as a Republican in a county, Brevard County in Florida. So there were a lot of bots, or seemingly to appear bots, accounts that were just like newly created accounts that started to leave a lot of responses, nasty responses to Professor Hamamoto's show. And so I happen to know that Whitney Webb's, the father of her second child, has many fake accounts. He's been called out on it by many other people. And so it could have been him, because what happened ultimately is that he decided to respond using his own account. Now, I didn't know that he also has what he calls a podcast, but I think he only just has a couple of hundred followers on his podcast. And I don't know. I mean, he's supposed to have been such a research people who talked to me after I realized that this man was doing everything in his power to discredit me. They were like, yeah, he's a really good researcher. Well, no, I don't think he is, because, well, you'll see, because I'm going to read some of these comments. Some of the other people who jumped in and started to were watching, and who jumped in, was a real researcher, a researcher who actually went to jail for the work that he was doing, and who has been deplatformed almost everywhere. And that man is Brendan O'Connell. I myself had not heard of him because he is so heavily censored, but he appears to have a YouTube, I don't know, YouTube ID. I don't know what these things are. And he responded to Johnny Vedmore, who is Whitney Webb's baby father. I don't know what else to call him, and also a massive troll, by the way. But Brendan O'Connell responded to Johnny. Now, what Johnny wrote, and I will see if I can find what Johnny wrote, because I was hoping to. I may not have written what he wrote because yeah, I don't think I copied what he wrote because basically, but in response to what he wrote, where again he named me and again made the sort of stupid allegation that I'm somehow connected to the Clintons. Really? All right. So, and in any event, Brendan O'Connell wrote to him, and Brendan O'Connell said the following: "Debate with me, Johnny. I dares ya. Your silly girlfriend's rant about me was off the planet. Was she on drugs? Her father, Richard Webb IV, is a multi-zillionaire property corporate lawyer out of drug money launder haven, Sarasota, Florida. You both pushed Putin relentlessly while he was blatantly in bed with Netanyahu, and you both forgot to mention that both Microsoft and Intel had their core R&D in Israel. Windows, Azure Cloud, How is KGB boy George Galloway again? Tell me where she first heard about the Talpoint program. Where? I spent over 3 years in jail over this. Beaten. 5 suspicious deaths, and the Israeli state comes out against me personally. What? You miss it? 2011, you miss it all? Well, I want to say that he was deplatformed. He was arrested. He gave Whitney Webb some information. And I'm going to add stuff that I also know about who gave her information, all of whom have been deplatformed, including myself. Okay, so he gave her some information. She used it. She never credited Brendan. Brendan ends up being harassed by Israel, like literally Israeli Mossad agents. Remember, like what happened to the women who outed Harvey Weinstein? So I'm sure that David Boies has a hand in this, because if anyone has the ability to get Israeli Mossad agents in the state of Israel to come after a podcaster. Brendan O'Connell is not a wealthy man. He just had a little podcast, and he had a Twitter account at some point, and everything was taken away from him. But Whitney Webb, according to Brendan, used some of the information, but left out the information concerning Israel. Okay. And then there have been some deaths. It's pretty dark. It gets very dark. And so we have to begin to wonder, okay, why was she so mysterious about who she was, where she came from, what she's done, why she moved to Chile in the first place, why, and by the way, on the show that she just did, she claims, it comes off as if she's living in the United States and she's, quote, an American. Well, according to this site and according to all the other information that we have on her, she's been living in Chile for, like, a decade. So she's no longer really an American. The other person, there are a couple of other people, Bob Fitrakis, who is an attorney and a journalist who lives in Columbus, Ohio, and with whom I've had the pleasure of working and speaking with several times back when I began to work on the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell story in 2019. Bob Petrakis put his life on the line in the mid-1990s, writing stories about Leslie Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein. He was threatened. His life was threatened. It's interesting that Whitney Webb has never received a death threat. Well, perhaps because she is what Professor Hamamoto claims she is. And you can just go listen to his show. So he received death threats. His website disappeared. He was deplatformed. He hasn't been on Twitter for years, and he doesn't even bother. He has to keep moving his information around from place to place. But when he and I spoke, I believe it was even the first time we spoke, he was very frank with me. He said, "Oh yeah, I gave Whitney Webb contacted me and I gave her a bunch of information." So he would have been the person to have known about the murder of Arthur Shapiro because he wrote about it. He is the person who had discovered the information and wrote about it for the first time in the 1990s about how Southern Air Transport moved their CIA-owned airline from Miami, Florida to Ohio, and the tax advantages, and then how they left Ohio with debt, and how Leslie Wexner was connected to this because they used Victoria's Secret, and it was moving theoretically merchandise from the Limited using the Orient as a place where they said that Southern Air Transport, which only Bob Fitrakis at the time had exposed as being a CIA-owned airline. Well, Bob Fitrakis tells me that he shared all of his research with Whitney Webb, and that when he then heard her speak on different podcasts, and when he saw her series, which got her a lot of recognition, all that information was Bob Fitrakis's hard work, and that she never credited him. Okay, so that's the second person that she has taken information from, used, and not credited. I began to strongly voice my opinion about the fact when I was on Twitter, on my Kirby Sommers handle, that she had not given Bob any credit, and I was very, very vocal about it. And then at some point, she began to give him credit. Maybe I called her out on it. Maybe she had to catch herself. Maybe she wanted to silence me, calling her out on that. But it doesn't stop there. Ryan Dawson, who I believe most of you know, was also censored. But Ryan Dawson and I have also had conversations. And Ryan has explained to me how Whitney came along and took all of his research for the 9/11 catastrophe, terrorist internal situation that happened in New York City, and that has connections to the Epstein group, let's call them, because it's a very extended group, and that she stole his work and never credited him. Well, I find it interesting that we have Brendan O'Connell arrested because of his exposure of some of the stuff that's happening in Israel, arrested and put in jail. He loses his platform. Bob Fitrakis loses his platform. Ryan Dawson loses his platform. And me, I'm a victim. I'm a victim and a survivor of this very same overworld elite trafficking ring connected to many other things, money laundering, drugs, intelligence organizations, murder. And so I get kicked off of Twitter about a week ago. That's interesting. Well, based on the fact that she has multi-generational wealth, with wealth comes power. So I no longer see it as, it's my personal opinion, I no longer see it as a coincidence that Brendan O'Connell, Bob Petrakis, Ryan Dawson, and myself, Kirby Sommers, have been deplatformed. I see this as an orchestrated attempt to silence anyone who has any information on Whitney Webb. That is now my stance, because it cannot be a coincidence. Anybody who she has taken work from, myself included, because her publisher has all of my work. He made sure to get all of my work. And I will probably do a podcast on that separately, because I don't want to rant on her publisher right now, but he has all of my work. And I did ask him at one point, I said, hey, why are you so interested in my work? I mean, aren't you going to be working with Whitney Webb? You know, he and I initially were going to work together. He was going to be my publisher too. But the deal that he and I initially arrived at, he completely changed. And he made it so difficult. He sent me a contract that it would have been impossible for me to sign. It was ridiculous contract. But he had all of my work, and then he came to my website and bought more of my work. And I did ask him at that time, hey, why are you so interested in and he gave me some, you're never going to get information from someone if they're trying to steal your work, or if they're trying to harm you. They're going to lie to you. Now, what I can't say about her publisher is that his father was OSS, CIA, and he says it himself. However, he places himself outside of the line of the intelligence world. Well, you know what? I don't see it that way. If your father was OSS, CIA, you're the son of, an intelligence officer, and there's something there. And I don't like to put people, quote, down or go, because I'm working on the larger story that's hidden under the Jeffrey Epstein and Glenn Maxwell very shiny cover, because there's a lot hidden. And it exposes a lot of horrific, inhumane crimes that are international in scope, that go back many, many years, and that again are multi-generational. So let's see. So to get back to another comment that was left by Brendan O'Connell. He wrote, we had worked her out in 2019, meaning that he figured out who she was by 2019, which is pretty much when she started writing about Jeffrey Epstein and using Bob Fitrakis' work. He says, we gave her all the data she needed. She took bits and pieces and played with it, promoted by Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, etc., the Kissinger and Associates gang, Rupert Murdoch. Her deviousness with Johnny, meaning Johnny Vedmore, knows no bounds, including the garbage she spewed about me, which was ridiculous. I've worked with government analysts in Iran, stayed with friends of Foreign Minister Sharif. I got out after 3 months when it became obvious Rouhani and Sharif were, in quotes, one of them. I presented this material to State Counterterrorism in 2009. I wrote from jail the entire thing, including transhumanism, AI, etc., from jail in 2012, with a badly broken, untreated arm, all documented, so that Brendan did the work on the transhumanism and AI that Whitney Webb has been using, but she doesn't credit Brendan with the fact that it's his research after he was arrested. And this is like real research. And when he realized that he was connected to people who were, quote, on the other side, he says he moved on. So what he is alleging here is that she is on the other side. Okay, let me continue here, sharing information on her great-great-grandfather. Okay, so he was born, as I said earlier, on December 16th, 1888. He died a young man on August 28th, 1927 in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm just going to read highlights of because it's a very long obituary, but basically, he lived in Ohio. And as all of you know, Ohio is literally intelligence connected on many levels. We not only have Leslie Wexner, who was in Ohio, we have a lot of other people who are in Ohio, including we have also Google, we have Facebook, we have a lot of the companies that have become social media platforms with their headquarters in Ohio. We know that Jeffrey Epstein lived in Ohio. And so interesting that Whitney Webb's great-great-grandfather, who died at the age of 39, very young to have died, but by the time he died, he was already very wealthy. So that tells me, and I'll probably do a little more digging, because that he was already very wealthy. So that tells me that he too came from money. All right. He was a graduate from the University of Kentucky, where he was a prominent student. And so he obtained his degree in 1911, and then he entered into an active business career. So first, he was in the building career. Then no surprise that his great-grandson, which would be Whitney Webb's father, becomes an attorney in the real estate field, because he makes his life's work first in the building area, building and contracting. He then entered the automobile business. So at the time, it was the period when we were going from horse and buggy to cars, and the first company to start making cars was Studebaker. Now, Studebaker, by the time that he died, he was the largest owner in the United States of Studebaker, of the sale of Studebaker. He owned many other companies, the Farmer Motor Company, names that are like today no longer really relevant. However, what I will say, he owned and operated a hotel, several farms. He owned a very large amount of land in Arkansas, considerable real estate in Lexington, Kentucky. And then he developed a lot of transportation lines. So he was actually the largest operator of Studebaker. Studebaker, for those of you who do not know, was an American automobile manufacturer based in South Bend, Indiana. They were founded in 1852. They were incorporated in 1868. They were, frankly, funded by the Lehman Brothers and Goldman Sachs. And they were also on the board of directors of Studebaker. So that what many of you are familiar with Goldman Sachs. And I'll tell you that anyone who becomes the Secretary of the Treasury in the United States comes from Goldman Sachs. And that's because they are, it's the banking industry. They are part of the Federal Reserve, and they sit on the boards of organizations such as the Council on Foreign Relations, of which Jeffrey Epstein was a member. And so that's a review of a little bit of who Whitney Webb is. And I welcome your comments, questions, responses. It's time to know who's who, I think. All right, well, like the video, subscribe, and have a good day. Bye-bye.